Morning Year 10, here is lesson 3 on an inspector course. So far I have had one of you email me the work, which out of 30 is slightly concerning. It is really important that you are doing these lessons every day and emailing me the work that you are doing. I should from now on be able to upload all of these videos onto YouTube, so they should be much easier for you to access if your class charts or Office 365 is dodgy. So, today we're going to analyse and evaluate how Mr. Birling's relationship with Gerald and Eric is presented in Act 1 so far. So we've already seen some things with Mr. Birling and Gerald and Mr. Birling and Eric. Gerald so far seems to agree with everything Mr. Birling says, and we know that Mr. Birling really wants to make sure Gerald thinks well of him. He buys the same port as his father. He wants Gerald to be very impressed with him because Gerald is an aristocrat. He is everything Mr. Birling wants to be, which is why he is so delighted about Gerald's engagement to Sheila. His relationship with Eric is a bit more complicated. Eric seems to disagree with some of the things that he's saying, particularly in his speech, which is quite interesting. So, as always, we're going to start with vocabulary. So our old word is socialist. The question that I'd like you to pause this and answer is, how does Priestley use Mr. Birling's speech to show he disagrees with socialism? Okay, so I'd like you to pause the video, have a go at answering that question. Our new word today is evasive. Now, if someone is evasive, they're trying to hide something. Okay, so if someone's evasive, they're trying to hide something. You know, they don't want to tell the truth, they don't want to be upfront about something. So, what might it reveal about a character if they're being evasive? So what might it make us think about them if a character's being evasive? Okay, so again, pause the video and answer the question. So, how does Priestley show that Mr. Birling disagrees with socialism? Well, firstly, he calls people like H.G. Wells and Bernard Shaw, who were socialist writers, cranks, meaning idiots. So he completely disagrees with their writing and their ideology, their views. But also this whole capitalist idea of caring about making a profit, talking down about the labour strikes. You know, a capitalist like Mr. Birling would not agree with the workers rising up to try and get more money or trying to get better working situation. So these all show that he is very against the socialist views of equality, the responsibility of the rich to look after the poor, because we know that Mr. Birling symbolises capitalism in this play, and he is deliberately dislikable to make us dislike capitalism. So what might it reveal about a character if they're being evasive? Well, they're secretive, they're deceitful, but they've definitely got they've got something to hide. They're ashamed, potentially, of something they've done. They don't trust their family or the people around them. So I'd like you to keep that in mind when we read the little bit of the play that we're going to read today. Okay, so yesterday, let's get a bit closer, we looked at Mr. Birling's speech. Focus that a little bit better. Okay, so yesterday we looked at Mr. Birling's speech and we got right to the very bottom of this page. Okay, so Mrs. Birling rises and the others rise too. So her husband has made his little speech and now she's deciding it's time for the women to withdraw and leave the men to be manly and talk about manly things. So she says, "Yes, of course, dear. Well, don't keep Gerald in here too long. Eric, I want you a minute." So Mrs. Birling, Sheila and Eric leave with just Gerald and Mr. Birling on stage. Now, Birling offers Gerald a cigar. And then Gerald says, "No thanks, can't really enjoy them." Birling takes a cigar himself. "Ah, you don't know what you're missing. I like a good cigar." He then indicates the decanter, which is filled with, port or wine. "Help yourself." Gerald says, "Thank you." So Birling lights his cigar, and Gerald, who has lit a cigarette, helps himself to port, then pushes the decanter to Birling. "Thanks." So confidentially, he's letting Gerald in to a secret. So he's confiding in him. There's something I'd like to mention in strict confidence while we're by ourselves. I have an idea that your mother, Lady Croft, reminder that she's an aristocrat, remember? She has that title. While she doesn't object to my girl, so Sheila, feels you might have done better for yourself socially. Now this is really, really important because Mr. Birling recognises that Gerald is marrying beneath his class. Sheila and the Birlings may have all the money, but they don't have the same status. Gerald isn't marrying an aristocrat. So we can see that this is something Mr. Birling is paranoid and potentially embarrassed about. And he gets the feeling that maybe the Crofts, Gerald's mum and dad, aren't that happy about the engagement. Maybe that's why they're not there. So Gerald's embarrassed, as you would be, and begins to murmur some dissent. So he begins to go, "Oh, no, no, no." But Birling checks him, he stops him. "No, Gerald, that's all right. Don't blame her. She comes from an old country family, landed people and so forth. And so it's only natural." So again, further evidence that they are an aristocrat. Now this is a quite ironic phrase, "it's only natural." Mr. Birling just thinks it's normal to look down on someone because of their class. But we know Priestley would have disagreed with this view. It's not natural to look down on someone because of their social class. That's ridiculous. But what I wanted to say is there's a fair chance I might find my way into the next honours list. Just a knighthood, of course. Now this is really important because Birling would become a Sir. Okay, he'd be Sir Birling. Now this would again raise his social profile. It would technically make him a member of the upper class, although he'd never have the same status as someone like the Crofts. So Gerald obviously is very pleased about that. "Oh, I say congratulations." And Birling says thanks, but it's a bit too early for that, so don't say anything. "But I've had a hint or two, you see. I was Lord Mayor here 2 years ago when royalty visited us. And I've always been regarded as a sound, useful party man." So obviously, Lord Mayor, he has status in the community, which comes up a little bit later in the play. And party man, he's talking about the Conservative Party, which in those days was viewed as the party of the rich and the wealthy. So I gather there's a very good chance of a knighthood, so long as we behave ourselves, don't get into the police courts or start a scandal, and laughs complacently. So there is real foreshadowing and irony here. "Oh, my dreams are all going to come true as long as I don't get into trouble or my family gets into trouble with the police." And what's the play called? An Inspector Calls. We know a policeman's going to come and visit at some point. So again, Priestley's cleverly and subtly building up this tension here. Now if you're complacent about something, he's confident they won't get in trouble. Okay, so he's very confident that, that would never happen. Just makes him look like even more of a fool. Gerald laughs. You seem to be a nice, well-behaved family. Yeah, you wait and see if you think that when you keep reading the play. Birling says, we think we are. So he's ignorant. Again, if I've taught you nothing else, it should be the meaning of ignorant. Okay, we've gone on about ignorance a lot. So he thinks they're well behaved, and we find out that it is the exact opposite. And Gerald says, so if that's the only obstacle, sir, I think you might as well accept my congratulations now. Now, obviously, Gerald's really pleased about this because it makes Sheila a more desirable partner in his parents' eyes. But he says, no, I couldn't do that, and don't say anything yet. Not even to Mother. I know she'd be delighted. So again, it will make Sheila look like a more favourable match for her son. Birling says, well, when she comes back, you might drop a hint to her. And you can promise that we'll try to keep out of trouble in the next few months. So there we go, we've got more foreshadowing. Priestley's not exactly subtle in this play. Okay, he wants us as the audience to pick up on this. They both laugh and Eric enters. What's the joke? Started telling stories? And Birling says, no, want another glass of port. Now it's interesting here that Birling confides in Gerald, not his son. Now, it could be because he thinks that Eric isn't, it's not going to really affect Eric too much, but it's still interesting when you think about our knowledge goal today, about thinking about the difference in the relationship, that he chooses to confide in Gerald. Gerald is the one he cares about impressing, rather than his own son. Eric sits down. Yes, please. Takes the decanter and helps himself. Mother says we mustn't stay too long, but I don't think it matters. I left them talking about clothes again. You'd think a girl never had any clothes before she gets married. Women are potty about them. Now we've got some nice casual sexism here. Birling says, yes, but you've got to remember, my boy, that clothes mean something quite different to a woman. Not just something to wear and not just something to make them look prettier, because, that's all girls should care about. But, well, a sort of sign or token of their self-respect. Now, we need to remember that Priestley supported women's rights. Now, obviously, by 1945 or 1946, women had more rights than they had in 1912, but, they were still very much second-class citizens. So what he's doing here is he is showing, again, like earlier with Mrs. Birling's comments, this sort of latent misogyny, well, all girls care about is clothes because looking pretty and looking attractive is really the only thing that matters to them. That's their status. That's how they get their self-respect, from looking good. So it's very misogynistic male view. And Gerald says that's true. So again, agreeing with Birling as always. So Eric says eagerly, yes, I remember, but then he checks himself. Now this is important because Eric was about to reveal something about a girl and then stops. But he stops himself. And then when Birling says, well, what do you remember? Eric, confused, says nothing. So he's being evasive. Okay, think about our word from the start of the lesson. He's got a secret involving a girl. And we have, again, when you read on, you will see that this is foreshadowing. Birling says nothing. Gerald says, sounds a bit fishy to me. So they are sort of joking with him, really. But it doesn't mean that it's not the truth. But again, it's interesting that whatever secret Eric has, he doesn't want to reveal it to his father. So we can infer from that they're not close. Okay, he doesn't want to reveal it to his father. So Birling takes it in the same manner, is joking. Yes, you don't know what some of these boys get up to nowadays. More foreshadowing. More money to spend than time. More money to spend and time to spare than I had when I was Eric's age. They worked us hard in those days and kept us short of cash. Even then, we broke out and had a bit of fun sometimes. Now, this is a subtle dig. You know, it's a subtle criticism. Remember, if something's subtle, then it's very, it's sort of a little bit vague and not obvious. Oh, sorry, I can't spell criticism. Subtle criticism of Eric. Mr. Birling has had to work for everything he's got. Eric has had it handed on him, and you can almost infer from this that Birling almost looks down. You know, he looks down on his son. Even though Mr. Birling's the one that's given him everything, he still doesn't respect the fact that Eric's made his own way in the world like Birling has. You know, we broke out and had a bit of fun sometimes. So, you know, they still went around the town. Gerald says, I bet you did. Birling says solemnly, but this is the point. I don't want to lecture you two young fellows again. Well, that's ironic, because he loves nothing but lecturing people. But what so many of you don't seem to understand now, when things are so much easier, is that a man has to make his own way, has to look after himself and his family too, of course, when he has one. And so long as he does that, he won't come too much harm. So, it's this every man for himself mentality. It's just important for a man to look after themselves. They don't have to care about society. They don't have to care about their workers. They don't have to care about the less fortunate. They just have to care about themselves and their family. And again, Priestley would view this as this selfish capitalist attitude. But some of the way these cranks talk and write now, so again, by cranks, we know he means socialists. You'd think everybody has to look after everybody else, as if we were all mixed up together like bees in a hive, community and all that nonsense. So it shows that Mr. Birling is against the principles of socialism. And this is really important, because we see what's going to happen in a second. But take my word for it, you youngsters, nice and patronising, and I've heard in the good hard school of experience, so again, I'm a businessman, I'm a capitalist, I know everything about everything. A man has to mind his own business and look after himself and his own, and we hear the sharp ring of a doorbell, and Birling stops to listen. Now this is the police inspector arriving. And it's really important that the arrival of the inspector interrupts this anti-socialist speech. And from this, we can infer that the inspector is going to have the opposite views to Mr. Birling, and he is going to be presenting socialist views on the stage to go against Mr. Birling's capitalist views. Okay? So that's all we're annotating for today. So we're going to go back to the task that I want you to do. So your task now, you've annotated that, is to write 2 mini PE paragraphs. One about how Eric and Birling's relationship is presented, and one about how Mr. Birling and Gerald's relationship is presented. So pick a quote that tells you something about Mr. Birling's relationship with his son Eric, write a mini PE. Pick another quote about Mr. Birling's relationship with Gerald, the way he views him, and write a mini PE. And then what I'd like you to do is email me the 2 mini PE paragraphs that you have done. Okay, I'm going to go upload this video on Office 365, and on class charts I'm going to put a link to the YouTube video, so hopefully you should all be able to find it. Okay, and I would urge you again, make sure you are doing the written work. Anybody that needs a copy of an inspector calls, I will try my best to get the school to send you one, but things are beginning to shut down. Unfortunately, in the school, they're having as little staff in as possible for obvious reasons. Okay, see you tomorrow.